Mr. Hoover and the rest of them. So any Islam, let me if you can you type it into the chat so that way the reverb doesn't kill me? I got everybody muted.
Did you grab that top part for me?
Hold up, my bad.
Y'all ain't family yet? Huh? Huh?
1 second.
That'll be all right. It's only 9:30-ish.
I don't know what's going on. So what happens is we created, or they, the proverbial they, created a system by which everybody would eventually be absorbed into it, no matter how much you fought back. You know what I'm saying? So it's not so much about whether or not they was Cherokees or whether or not they was Lakota or whether or not they was Moors or Muslims or whatever. What they wasn't is what they are today, in the sense of what they wasn't was perpetual slaves. We know that. What they wasn't was imported from somewhere else. You know what I'm saying? What they wasn't was foreign to the actual land that they were born on. We can definitely say that they wasn't any of that. What they wasn't was naked savages walking around here that just were hunter gatherers. These were mound builders. These were city makers. These are people that dwelt and had like lights and running water and toilets and stuff. That's why, I mean, think about it. If Europe was so great, why are they always coming over here? Africa was so great. China was so great. Why are they always coming back over here? Because that's how it always was. One of the earliest books that you can get on the original or the pre-establishment of the what we call the American Republic, you can get in a book called Periplus, written by our great ancestor Hannibal, who was the great great grandfather of Hannibal. He was the father of Hamilcar, or the grandfather of Hamilcar, I believe. And so when those great Moors came back over here, or never left, or just established the redirection, and then created the trade routes that they still use today to move goods back and forth throughout the world. The book is called Periplus, Periplus, I believe. You know what I'm saying? Let me see. Yes, Periplus. It was the voyage around the world on the coast and coming over here in America. And from the founding of that book is when he established the annexation of this part of the world back to the empire, basically reuniting everything in what they call in the legal document today that we refer to as the Bornstone, which is in Massachusetts, what we call Massachusetts today. Yes. Yes, indeed. So, this is getting back to that. We can say that that's the original American Republic, or the founders of the Republic, because they were the ones who were dealing with that form of culture. Carthage was ill in the sense that it was, as it was written about, when you read stuff like what Homer and these other ones we talk about, but really look into the writings of like Manetho, Manetho and them type of people. But long story short, it was basically what it is, what Rome became, what Rome ascended to be. It was, you know what I mean? It was basically translated into what we call Roman democracy, or Roman governance, which is really just taking people over by hostile. It's about annexation of property through hostile takeover. So really, that was just what we form a Roman law, was just another form of draconian law. Draconian meaning anything coming from the draconian system, like very harsh, penile. Okay, so I think one of the issues of us getting into this is that we these terms are used around and used in banking and law. And the thing is, with other societies, banking and law and society and things like that have more clearly defined boundaries, whereas in our old customary form of living, those boundaries defined by the traditions and the customary things that we just automatically knew. That's why we were automatically, as they say, born on the square, born civilized, born 360 degrees straight up on the square, because we didn't have to learn how to be human. You understand? We already were the proto aspect of that. And so once we allowed ourselves to be lumped in with everybody else is when the problems came. And then we were, in a sense, put in a different form of education as to who we are, in which now we went from the higher self being the focus or the primary focus of self, in which now the lower self then becomes that which the higher self has to shine through from or overcome to be. Whereas we, in our culture and the way we used to live, how we were dictated whether or not things outcome was different. So it was a different perspective. Whereas they say, like how we know today, you're guilty until proven innocent, but we know that that's not the case. It was more of a situation where innocence was on the burden of who was producing the accusation. So it wasn't so much that the person that was being accused was innocent. It was the thing that if you accuse this person, you have to be morally and abjectly ready to stand behind whatever that is. Because slander was very big and is very big in the so-called melanated communities. You just can't go talk stuff about people and expect them not to step to you. However, in the old days, you know what I mean, in the business between us, it could be worked out. But anybody that wasn't of the nation, it was automatic death. You couldn't just impugn the honor of a woman in the company of a certain type of being, a certain type of man, and expect to walk away, as they say, unscathed. That is the basis of what Chevalier, or the customary aspect of Moorish law, started as, protecting the will of the female, not to dominate. You see what I'm saying? Those practices came later as the original content that the men were supposed to be brought up understanding was no longer given to them due to the dalliance or whatever of their fathers, in which now they're forced to be raised by their mothers, or worse, being raised by foreigners in war camps and stuff like that, and now taught that how they live is not as good as the people who is now trying to come in and put them in power. And then once they're put in power, they become vassal kings to whatever state and help them do that. That's the basis of every drug movie, every movie that we've ever seen since we've been alive, because they're all based on the same story. You know what I'm saying? So essentially, any territory that is ceded to any state is therefore a part of that state. That's basic, like as they say, contract law, property law. If it was ceded to them, then they try to make it perpetual where they don't ever have to give it back. However, if it was taken by force, you see, and the consent was never really given to the people of whom it was removed, then it becomes the basis for some sort of action by whatever state was overcome. State don't just mean geographic location. As a matter of fact, it probably means that the least. State is the derivative of the word status or status, right? Which again is a Latin word. You know what I'm saying? Which means, again, it's coming to us from our own people. Therefore, as a state, state of being, state of understanding. You know what I'm saying? As a body, right? As a group, as a state of consciousness, you have the right to a republican form of government. That's the contract that allowed that's the express trust of the contract of what we call the United States. That's it. It has nothing to do with whether or not you like guns or not. It has nothing to do whether you like a statue of Satan out front your courthouse or not. That's not the point. The point is you are supposed to have the right to express yourself so long as it does not endanger the populace. Now, does forcing boys to go to the bathroom with girls endangering the populace? As an example. Is that a threat? Has a crime been committed prior to them saying, okay, well, boys can go to girls' bathrooms now? I just read a report today that girls are getting, there's a rise in bladder infections in little girls who go to school and stuff because they're scared to go to bathrooms now because of the new laws in which that. So they're actually holding their pee and they're having problems. So doesn't this little girl have the right to feel safe when she goes to the bathroom? This is just an example. We're talking about law because I don't think we always talking about law from the defensive position, right? To travel, stuff like that. Do we even understand how law applies to whatever methodology of whatever state you're in? When they say red state, blue state, they talk about Republican, Democrat, but they're also speaking of whatever exists within that red state. That could also mean people who are in that state that really are Republicans but are voting as communist Republicans. You know what I'm saying? And things of that order. Yeah, like they used to have to get permission to come to the schools that the Moors went to. White or black kids could not go. And this is on record up until to this day. But when you read the book, Delaware's Forgotten Folks, the story of the Nanticoke and the Delaware Moors, it'll throw you because they'll show you white people in the pictures. You see what I'm saying? This is how they able to do stuff. But remember, this is also thrown in, and then Moors will say, oh, see, that means that these was really white people acting like that. No, these is more Caucasian people who, after these tribes were broken up, after these Moors was bleached out and forced out, the ones that was left basically mating with whoever was left of different nations and then eventually leaving that stock to them to be able to hold on to their land. But now they bleached out. Not to mention all of these lands were taken by force. And we proved that, right? With the surrender, we can just go as far as the surrender letter of General Canby in 1867 at the taking of the governorship of North Carolina under military duress that led to the rest of the occupational United States forces destroying any aspect of the republic, taking itself up. And it's no coincidence that after that is when all the so-called race riots started. In some instances, they're simultaneous. So is that a coincidence? We can prove that so-called black people, black Republicans, the original so-called people who were running the congressional seats and all of that of the several states were literally forced out and massacred. Matter of fact, tonight in The Watchmen, they taking a play out of the thing and they comparing what's happening because it's taking place in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And in that, they're going back in dream sequences or historical reference sequences at how they dropped kerosene bombs and all of that to get us up out of there. But they're going to glamorize it and turn it into something else and then get, Negro Masons to basically back their version of it. However, there was more going on to that. Because each state, each individual Moor was still a party to the original compact so long as they held on to their nationality. So in that, what is nationalism? because people want to now say that nationalism is now of another form, or being a national, having a national identity, or defining one with that is basically saying that your character is that of a property of the national government. But remember, brothers and sisters, if we are the nationals, then the original national government was descended out of the general government, which was the primary government that was running everything up until 1791. That you are still a part of, or were a part of, so long as you followed and were part of the protected by the treaty that was signed the same year they signed the Constitution. Come on, man. The last thing to be signed was the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, and they said that that's what ended the war. So if they were fighting Britain, why would the Treaty of Peace and Friendship stop the war between the United States and Britain? They can't answer that. So what is in that? So they want you to now think that you being a part or having connection to a national government is somehow wrong, or that's somehow going against the prophet. But the prophet never said nothing about naturalization. He only used the word nationalization. Some Moors believe that the way to naturalization is naturalization, because you have to. Nobody was actually born a Moor or Moorish American in the literal sense because of the brainwashing and the 200 some odd years of conflict, born consciously as Moors. You understand? However, if we are not that, it's hard for you to become that if there wasn't an inkling of it in you. Most people do things that they like doing when they was children. And whether they realize it or not, usually pattern themselves after their parents. The more you say you don't want to be like your mother and your father, methinks thou dost protest too much, because most times you become that. My father was a writer. I became a writer, not because I wanted to. I didn't even realize that that's what I was until one day he put me on, like, damn, yeah, I do that. See what I'm saying? So nationalism, right, is an ideology and movement that promotes the interests of a particular nation, as in a group of people, especially with the aim of gaining and maintaining nation sovereignty, self-governance over its homeland. So in order to have a nation, you have to have a land, because nation and nature, or netter, we know is the same thing. Nationhood, natural, right? Nationalism holds that each nation should govern itself free from outside influence. That's self-determination. That a nation is a natural idea and basis for a polity. Okay? That the nation is the rightful source of political power, which is popular sovereignty. It further aims to build and maintain a single national identity based on shared social characteristics such as culture, language, religion. Okay? Right, but we got to understand that all Moors, even though, like, you have Moors who are referring to themselves as nationals, right? But the way they act, what they're actually practicing, is communism, which is the opposite of nationalism. Because communism in the political and social sciences, right, which comes to us from the Latin communis, right, which means common or universal, is the philosophical, social, political, and economical ideology and the movement of whose ultimate goal is the establishment of a communist society, which is socio-economic order structured upon the common ownership of the means of production and the absence of social classes, money, and the state, right? But whenever you see things on communism, who's running stuff? The people or the state? Who? Who? Exactly. See? Communism includes a variety of schools of thought, which broadly include what? Marxism, anarchism, right? And anarcho-communism, as well as political ideologies grouped around both. All these share the analysis of the current order of the social society stems from the economic system. The opposite of communism then is what? Capitalism. So when you get Moors or so-called blacks, right, that basically create situations in which uh, they have a unit that's not based in a national identity, but they're collecting money for a religious ideology, that is a form of communism, unless sanctioned by the state. You understand what I'm saying? Because they want to get rid of what? Social classes, money, and the state itself. So if the state itself, whatever state that you're in, is in the way of communism, meaning your mental state, right? Your geographic state, whatever state is opposite of that, whatever social class or ideology exists, has to go. That's why Chinese people, again, China, is establishing a communist empire where? Through capitalism in Africa. No, I think that we were closer to a communist society in the 80s. Now it's past that. But let's look at capitalism. Capitalism is an economic system based on the private ownership of the means of production. You see that? Communism is about common ownership. So that sounds good, right? Of the means of production, whatever means that may be. So that sounds good. Common, us all together, communists, right? Communists, right? However, if one of us has a state, right, that does not agree with that, then you create what's called the struggle of the classes, the class war. And that class war usually exists between what? Communism and capitalism, right? The two C's, like in the Coco Chanel logo, which is really the Vesica Pisces, right? Capitalism, which is an economic system based on the private ownership, means of production, and their operation for profit. Characteristics central to capitalism include private property, capital accumulation, wage labor, voluntary exchange, price system, competitive markets, and in a capitalist market economy, decision-making investments are determined by every owner of wealth. Therefore, you are not considered a member of the capitalist society if you are not participating in the capitalist model. Now, in this, do you see anything, did it say anything about jobs in this definition in capitalism? Do you see anything about jobs in it? Did it say anything about going to work? Did it say anything about unemployment? Whereas the prices and the distribution of goods and services are mainly determined by competition in goods and services markets. Okay, so in capitalism, it's all about what's called a free market economy. That means, does anybody know what that means? A free market economy is an economy of which your market is free to go into other markets and subdue and do whatever they want to do with it. At one point, this was called marginalizing. Now, all of this, as you see, did you see anything in these about anything about a nation? Even in communism, did it say anything about the nation? It only used the term society. Did you notice that? Same thing with capitalism. Had nothing to do. You see anything when it says in the wealth of nations, anything like that? You didn't see anything like that, did you? No. Democratic socialism. Does anybody know what that is? That's what the Panthers was practicing. Well, this is what eventually offshoot groups like the Uhuru movement and these other movements that came out, right, are practicing. So when you hear them say democratic socialism, do you know what that means? Hillary Clinton, when she was in doing her thing in college, at one point was flirting and was an admitted democratic socialist. Eventually, she dropped the socialism. Democratic socialism is a socialist political philosophy which advocates that political democracy alongside with socially owned economy, with an emphasis on workers' self-management and democratic control of economic institutions within a market for some form of decentralized planned socialist economy. Come on, we're adults, so we got to look at what this is really saying. What this is saying is that democratic socialism is a social political philosophy. This is not even a political philosophy. This is, well, it's a political philosophy that is not rooted in the natural flow of what we consider politics, meaning that democratic socialism didn't exist in ancient Kemet. You understand? We wasn't doing that. This is a modern thing. But they want you to think that modern things, because they're modern, are what are the standard of what things were. But essentially, when they say a decentralized plan for a socialist economy, what they're talking about is removing the right of the people to have control over the democratic process that they use in their society. This is another form, another way of saying you know what another way of saying democratic socialism is? Anybody know what democratic socialism is also called? I'll let you know. It's called Nazism. The Nazis were democratic socialists. Think about that. Like I said, the people who put Hitler in power was not the Rothschilds in them. They came into the game later when they realized, oh, this dude is about to really pop. So let's find a way to finagle the money up in behind this dude. He got elected by the workers. You see, the lower class, the civil servants, the bus drivers, these type of people. Guess who elected Donald Trump? The bus drivers, the poor white people. You dig what I'm saying? The people who are also disenfranchised. Exactly. The workers, right? The minions. Thank you. So-called white America. Low, what they consider. It's not even me saying it. They consider them lowbrow, so-called NASCAR dads. That was another name they used to come up for them. All these other ways of saying white people. So because the Indians of America were originally Muslims, they have their own system of government. That system of government was not dependent upon what we consider that stuff to be today. And so that history again had to be washed away. This is Mozart, who they also have as the Chevalier. This, you know, is the other guy that they've been passing off as this guy that was painted or whatever during the Reconstruction. Why would you go to such a degree to do that? Because everybody loves Beethoven, right? So if everybody loves Beethoven, he can't be black, he can't be melanated. Those Moors that understand what to do with their silver bonds and stuff and what's going on in places like Pulaski County. This was the flag of Count Pulaski. Okay? But they'll have you thinking, oh, Pulaski, that's Polish. Yeah, but the Polish was Moors too. They was melanated too, up until a certain point. Why you think they're hated by white people? Look at these people, man. These ain't white people. Look at these dudes, man, with feathers and scimitars. It's in America. It's in Pulaski County. You know what I'm saying? This is what they named the county after. This is a Moor. Excuse me. This is a painting of Count Pulaski riding into battle. Yeah. It's New York, but at one point it was just York. At another point it was, Gotham, Amsterdam, Brutium. You know what I'm saying? Problem is, when you what gives the royal family its so-called position in the world is because they claim this descent from this ancient line. When you can have a descent line coming from somebody or something, you see what I'm saying? That becomes something else. Get this. So these so-called Nazis that they're fighting are democratic socialists, right? Who invented the Democratic Party in the United States? Islam. Thank you. Thomas Jefferson, right? Yeah, we know the KKK through Pike because Pike was a Democrat or whatever, right? Yet today, the base who the Democratic Party uses to do its business or whatever is who? So-called black people, right? Right. Well, why would blacks or Negroes support a party that actually fostered the KKK? But then their ancestors, who were Republicans and founded of that so-called Republican Party, they don't. They think that that's evil. Look at it like this. This is when they say that we Moors, right? And they talk about Sharia law, right? This is what they want us to think that we down with. Because Sharia law is one thing, but I'm going to show you something else. Excuse me. As a legal system, Sharia law is exceptionally broad. While other legal codes regulate public behavior, Sharia law regulates public behavior, private behavior, and even private beliefs. Compared to other legal codes, Sharia law is also calls for capital punishments over incarceration. Of all legal systems in the world today, Sharia law is the most intrusive and restrictive, especially against women. So in a Sharia law, theft is punishable by amputation. And they justify this. This is what the Quran verses come from. As you notice, their Quran's with a Q. And I don't think this is the Yusuf Ali version. I think this is, the one that they do. Criticizing Muhammad or denying that he is the prophet is punishable by death. Criticizing and denying Allah is punishable by death. A Muslim who becomes a non-Muslim is punishable by death. A non-Muslim who leads a Muslim away from Islam is punished by death. So as you can see, this would fall under what I was talking about as Roman draconian law, right? Because this is what the Arabs and these people impose on each other, right? So this is what the Muslims or people who subscribe to their perspective of Islam deal with. This is what they are all subject to once they in that. So in their view, they view things from the extreme. Okay. Now look at the difference though when you look at what's called Sherifian law. All right. Yes. Sorry. Under Sherifian law, every subject of a Sherifian state is regarded as a Moroccan, whether he is a Muslim or not. Every Moroccan has the right to individual liberty, provided that he does not interfere with the liberty of others. Individual liberty consists in each citizen being able to do and say and write what he likes on the condition that he respects the public order. According to personal condition, primary education is obligatory. Freedom of expression is permitted provided that the public order is respected. All Moroccans are equal in terms of the function of the Maghstan, meaning the empire, which is distributed in accordance with the competence of the individual and not through the intermediaries or money. You understand what we're saying? You see the difference between, do you see the difference? Do you hear any death in this yet? Anybody dead? From the first line we read in the Sharia law, niggas getting their arms chopped off. Do you see anything like that? This says that whether, if you exist in a Sherifian state, you are regarded as Moroccan, meaning Moorish, whether you Muslim or not. And we existed in a meritocracy. Because it says what? All Moroccans are equal in terms of the functions of the empire, which are distributed in accordance with the competence of the individual and not through the intermediaries, meaning your estate, your trust, your lawyer, whatever, or your money. An illiterate cannot occupy a post in the Maghstan. A civil servant must be able to read and write Arabic correctly. And through Arabic, that means everything else. How many times you done went to the DMV and dealt with somebody totally illiterate or had to call somebody on the phone and didn't know what they was talking about because they had such a heavy Indian accent or whatever, you couldn't understand what you're trying to get. Yeah. Their New Deal, that land was taken from them under the auspices, again, of tacit consent based upon them being redesignated as a subject of something else. But I'm showing you that we was already subjects under Sherifian law, not Sharia law. That's why every town in the United States has a sheriff, right? Has a sharif, right? Because that was the mandate of the treaty. Because all the lands that was a part of the empire was under Sherifian law, right? Because it was a Moroccan empire, right? It wasn't a Muslim empire, was it? There was Muslims in it. It was Islamic, right? But it was not this. Death is punishment. This is how the descendants of Hagar was running their aspect of Islam and worked with Rome and all of that to help depose us and establish what became the fall of the Western empires over there in what we've considered today Western Africa, which they still doing today. One was defensive, one was offensive. One was based on your merit, one was based on trying to control that merit. The fortune and property of every Moroccan subject is guaranteed. The government does not have the right to take away any subject's property unless it is required for public utility and after a decision by the consultative council and the express approval of the Sultan, the owner will be properly compensated. Period. How many times they force black people out of their house and they give them nothing? All of that is under Sharia law because Sharia law is Roman draconian law. Because they were in a situation where remember, man, these people was damn near illiterate. Who was translating all of this stuff into Arabic? Or what became Arabic? When they said the majority of the so-called Arabs of the day couldn't read, or what that, because we are perceiving the term based on that, but that's not what the people refer to themselves as. Arab came from Arab or Arab, which is another form of Eber, which again is another way of saying Hebrew. So those are Moors. Yet everything that when we use those words, where people are typically referring to that as the people that's there today, and they know that that's not them. So again, under the laws of the Sharif, wherever the Sharif was there, they had to hold it down. And the Sharif badge is the 6-pointed star, right? Six-pointed star, right? And ain't that the so-called Star of Abraham, or what they call the Star of David, which is the star of who? The Ebers, right? The Hebrews, who we was just talking about, right? So what are these guys talking about when they saying that we're just like everybody, we just copying what everybody else is doing? How can that be? Boom. The Moorish customs authority shall directly inform the diplomatic consular agents of any violations of this regulation which may be committed under this jurisdiction in the order. Similar violations by Moorish subjects shall be brought directly by the customs to the Sherifian authority. Every confiscation, fine, and penalty must be imposed on foreigners by the consular jurisdiction and the Moorish subjects by the Sherifian jurisdiction. See? 2 different jurisdictions. Yet, when you use one flag to fly under the other, that's when you can run into issues, because then that's trying to fly two vessel flag without a treaty. But we're the only Asiatics with something like that to be able to bring it to context. So what they have to do is discourage us from exercising that part of our nobility. So due to the United States adopting democratic socialism, which is what is democratic socialism? Nazism. That's right. It's Nazism. Don't ever forget it. Fascism. That's right. Slavery. That's right. These are all isms. An ism is a man-made thing. So these are things that were created by a certain type of man, a mankind. But because mankind created something doesn't mean that that is what man created. We cannot keep taking responsibility for the destruction of this planet when we at times went through bouts of forced amnesia, conversion, and coercion to the point of perpetual amnesia. And so now we're waking up to this fact. We're trying to put this stuff together, but we're using the wrong medium to do it. There will never be a revolution on social media. The only revolutions that can work on social media really are those that are funded by D-wave computers nowadays. These things that's pumping and under control of DARPA, CIA, and all them people. That's how they started the Arab Spring, to be able to get rid of Gaddafi, which we know was a plan that they had back in the late 80s to early 90s, when Wolfowitz and Rumsfeld and the rest of them niggas created that high one day somewhere and said, we're going to call this the plan for a new American century. And we're in it. We're in it right now. We're in it. So we can't say that it's a conspiracy when it's a fact. You can go online and read it. And it's a play-by-play of how they either want to set up the pipeline that goes around the world or the railway system. The Russians want the railway system. The Russians and the Chinese want the railway system. They don't want, the United States and them don't want that. Because that'll start a whole new railroad baron thing. That's what the movie Snowpiercer was about. All of these potential realities being played out as entertainment. You know what I'm saying? So through the democratic socialism, we get the revival of oligarchism, meaning the few are able to rule and command. So there's only like 2,000 billionaires on the planet. And there's maybe 15, 16 million millionaires on the planet. So everybody else is technically broke. Yeah, because that's also an allegory of Dante's descent into hell. It's also the continuation of Willy Wonka, part 2 of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Snowpiercer is. The dude who run the train is actually was Wally, was the little kid in Willy Wonka. He grew up to create the train that saved humanity or whatever. That's why you had to have the ticket, the ticket to get on the train and all that stuff. But that oligarchism set to form the power structure in which the power rests in a small number of people. These people may be distinguished by what? Nobility, wealth, education, corporate, religious, political, or military control. You see, such states, see now all of these are states. Such states are often controlled by families who typically pass their influence from one generation to the next, but inheritance is not necessarily the condition or application to this term. So this would represent the celebrity class and anybody in a well-to-do position, right? Because all of these people are technically democratic socialists, whether they are Republican or not, or libertarian or whatever or not. Anybody that's not striving to create to apply the equal footing doctrine to quote unquote black people, whether they have declared themselves or not, is down with it. That's why they marry each other, no matter what color they are, and money marry money. And have such arcane, crazy, bloodletting or whatever type of rituals to make sure that they always maintain a certain level of understanding of that. Being able to reach the higher levels of the lower self. If you understand what I mean. The highest level of the reptilian brain, which is really the lowest level of the brain itself. So that's where they always strive to function from. And these man-made ideological social states or constructs are how they manipulate the so-called black man and woman to participate in the whole thing. I told you they can't stop you, so they got to get you to identify with one of these things. And if you identify with this, because you understand, each one of these is also backed by a sexual preference. Nationalists, usually heterosexual. Communists, homosexual or asexual. Capitalists, anyway it goes. Democratic socialists, they into the other stuff. This is where the other stuff starts coming in. The trans and all that other crazy stuff. The oligarchists, these are the people creating the procedures and the programs and whatever to do that. And then all of it is filtered through Darwinism. If you're dealing with cities, then it's a form of what the comic book or book Mortal Engines refer to as municipal Darwinism, which is a fictional idea. But if you think about it, don't cities compete for control or viability over what state is going to win the Super Bowl. So if cities are competing in capitalism and capitalism is being basically funded by democratic socialists, right? And that democratic socialism is creating a fake war against what? Communism, right? To mask the fact that they're all participating and being controlled by oligarchism. The Darwinism is what allows them to get us to fight one another. And then we mistakenly call all of this white supremacy. You understand? Now, as you see, in the only thing that ever spoke of people was what? Well, in terms of the religion, in terms of this graph right here, that I'm showing you, out of all of the different systems, what was the only thing that actually described and referenced living people? Exactly. Nationalism. Exactly. Exactly. The devil speak with a forked tongue. So anything that when you become a voter and you're registering to vote, you're actually casting a ballot. The word cast, what's the difference between casting a ballot and casting a lot or casting a spell? You're putting something in a universe to get an outcome, correct? So you're participating in witchcraft, right? If you on a basic level, right? So when people are urging you to vote, they're urging you to practice a form of magic to their benefit, though. Right? Because that's your wish, that's your power, right? That's what they keep telling you. You have the power. That's why Puppy was brainwashing people, telling them vote or die. Remember that? Threatening you, threatening the youth. You understand? So what is white supremacy? White supremacy is a term used to categorize various belief systems. See? The various belief systems. What were we just showing? What I'm just showing you. This is what it really is. That are central to which are one more of the following tenets. One, white should have dominance over people of other backgrounds, right? In all of these systems, right? Darwinism, white people running it. Oligarchism, white people running it. Democratic socialism, white people running it. Capitalism, white people running it, right? Communism, white people running it, right? Nationalism. When was the last time you ever heard of them? Whenever they speak of nationals, they only speak of you as a national when you're foreign or you somewhere else, whatever you're national, whatever country. But when the president speaks of it, he's speaking of it in terms of the debt that the U.S. owes the national government, that you and I are guaranteed at our birth, so long as we are not citizens, what they perceive as United States citizens. But a United States citizen is different than a citizen of the United States. That's just another laborious way of going around saying a national. Because one is protected by, again, a Republican form of government, and the other is subject to a uniform code that was established in 1871. So how could something in 1871 have more precedence of something that was put in stone in 3 BC? You know what I'm saying? In 32 BC or whenever Periplus was written. The feds are the so-called United States, the cog, the agency that's there to do the bidding or for the nationals. But the national government is hijacked and done away with, and its descendants are put in perpetual prison camps that they refer to as ghettos. And the only way out that they perceive is to participate in one of the systems that we have just found out are all what? If we add nationalism, communism, capitalism, democratic socialism, oligarchism, and Darwinism, what do we get? We get white supremacy. And there's others. There's others. Just like they invent genders and all that, there's other aspects of this that they have categorized as well. I don't want to get into all of that. But what I'm saying is that's the basis. What we keep talking about is this idea of white people hating us and doing these evil things to us. Yes, all of that's true, but you have to understand there's a method to how they're able to do it. They fool themselves into believing that all of these systems are different. You see what I'm saying? So they train most young white males to be Darwinistic. They don't have a free radical way of thinking. And the ones that do are automatically set upon by the ones that they've trained in their societies to curb their natural influence or ability to see human beings for what they really are. And the same for so-called black kids. When was this implemented? This was implemented during the busing situation. Where you had to actually have armed guards walk little black girls to school to prove a point that white people had to open their schools to us. And did we benefit from it? They actually had to make laws to allow so-called Asiatic people to go to school, so-called black Negroes to go to school. They had to make laws to stop certain types of killings of Asiatics. So they said, oh, well, we got you from Africa. Well, this is a paper that was written by a guy named Kenneth C. Dick, the Aboriginal and early Spanish name, some Caribbean. The Leeward, which was the Sotavento Islands, which run from Guadeloupe, like the Treaty of Hidalgo, Guadeloupe, and the Saint Guadalupe, to St. Croix, were named the Leeward because the Spaniards, i.e., the Moors, practiced sailing to their leeward. All these islands were said to have been inhabited or in the power of the Caribs, which were before Caribs, it was Antillians or Antilles, which we also then get the corruption, Atlanteans and whatever. The Carib cannibal tradition began, when they say cannibal, they're saying carnival, began in San Salvador, right? Watlings Island on October 12, 1492, when Cristobal Colon, the Christ-bearer colonizer, first stepped to the American shores. These peaceful natives were, in fact, all of Columbus encountered in his first voyage, belonged to the so-called, Taino culture of the Arawak language group. The Arawaks and Amerind people, Amerind, we remember, means more. We proved that. And the Arawaks and Amerind people came out in various places in South America, probably by way of Peru, Ecuador, Guyana, Colombia, Venezuela, Trinidad, to some of those 3,000 years ago. Now, on the old maps, they talk about Spain and all that, right? They talk about that, but they talk about the Caribbean and all that over here. And they're also naming these places over here, right? Well, on the maps, find one, excuse me. Ah, oh. Look, that's all over here. That's all it is. New California, ancient California. Kingdom of Guatemala, Kingdom of the Yucatan, Kingdom of Mexico, from Mexico all the way down here, New Santander, Kingdom of Leon. Because all of it's coming out, in my opinion. It's all coming out. He was Asiatic. It's all coming out that he was that Isabella and them was even darker skinned and all of that. Like all of this stuff is coming out. So they gotta make TV shows like The White Queen and The White Princess and The Spanish Princess and you know what I'm saying? You notice what I'm saying? The more and more this stuff comes out, the more we talk about Moors, the more all of these movies and stuff is coming out with them as that. Majority of people watch Game of Thrones as black people. I've never watched it, me personally, but most of the people I know that consider themselves black, they into it. And I can see why. Because I'm into movies like that. We all are because that's reminiscent to the energy that we was lost, like was wiped from us, however it happened. And now that we're waking up to it again, we're starting to realize, well, wait a minute, if the country is 243 years old and they've been only fighting for 222 years straight, then when was the time of peace? When did that ever happen? We'll get into that. Columbus acquired the natives, no doubt, the sign language of the Lucayas, and whence the enemy warred upon the Lucayas, stealing their women, plundering, committing man-eating atrocities. The Lucayas indicated directions to West Florida and to the south. So again, we're showing that people that was down there was up here. So where was the imported people from Africa? Oh, these is all of the ones he killed, right? The first people called the Indians were those who occupied the Greater Antilles, Cuba, Haiti, Puerto Rico, Jamaica. Who lives in those places today? You see what I'm saying? Like, what are they talking about? So the Arawaks were some Mexican-looking people that he just got rid of. All of that's lies, man. We are where we always was at. The only people that's been moved is the people that was forced to move. We started being forced to move when they started to take over and coup d'etat everything after the cataclysm. And they created historical accounts based on them destroying and taking over everything. And then imagine living in the dominions of what we call Louisiana or whatever, living there. And then one day you hear that, this part of the whole spot is now sold and you got to go to the flag raising. And then the next morning you see these white guys or these people there with guns. And now you got to sign papers and say now you're conscripted as a Negro or something. That's why Moors was fighting against all that. Not everybody was with that. Not everybody was having that. You're talking to kings. You're talking to kings and queens. Like that's what we're forgetting. We keep looking to Africa. There was kings and queens right here not having it. Black Hawk. Read about the Black Hawk Wars. Read about the Chickamauga Wars. These Moors was not having it, man. Whole towns would just wake up, just disappear. Right? It was years before white people could just be in colonies and feel like they was okay. They was just winding up, just gone. Read about the town in Roanoke. That's real. Croatan and all that. That's real. Those is old Moors. Our ancestors getting rid of these people, the mound walkers. Read about that stuff. We keep trying to battle with information. Like read about the False Face Society. Read about the mound walkers. This is the stuff that the Anasazi and the Apache and the Comanche and them was invoking on these white people, man. Where do you think the Sicilians get the idea of cutting a horse head and leaving it in the bed with you? It was worse than that. We are the first round. You know what I'm saying? We was the guys here when and got it together for everybody to be able to live for real. That's why we at the bottom now. And again, everybody's participating in it, whether we like it or not. That's why I said we're all born in sin. But subrogation is the act of one party claiming the legal rights of another that it has reimbursed for the losses. Subrogation offers in property casualty insurance when a company pays off one of its insured for damages, then makes its own claim against the others who have made the caused loss, insured the loss, or contributed to it. Subrogation is the assumption by a third party, such as a secondary creditor or insurance company, of another party's legal right to collect the debt or damages. It is a legal doctrine whereby one person is entitled to enforce the subsisting or revived rights of another for one's own benefit. Understand? The next one. Think about that more. Think about how come Moors ain't talking about this? We keep talking about leaning people, keep talking about right to travel, we keep talking about all this other stuff. When the basic aspect of what's going on is everybody is trying to put you and I under a form of law that's contrary to the Sherifian law, which translates in American jurisprudence to the Republican form of government, i.e., the law that was set down by the several states, and the Bill of Rights, and the Constitution of 1787, and the Treaty of Peace and Friendship of 1787. All four of those form the compact of the fourfold republic, of which I'm guaranteed that and protected from that. So the only right I have is the right of subrogation because I have to do it on behalf of the estate or trust that was used to establish this fraud to begin with. And what was that? What was that? See, I'm talking about jurisprudence now. I'm not talking about legality. We're talking about what's right. Jurisprudence deals with what's right. Natural equity looks at that which should have been done as done. So when I put you on notice that this is my position and this is the position I'm taking, so long as I, again, have not violated my own law, I'm protected by yours to follow through with what I told you. So if you violate that, then you automatically fall in default because you're going against the initial spirit of what I sent it to you to do. And in legalese, that's referred to as UCC 1-308. It makes sense when you let it. That's why they don't want you to sign that. Because that shit just came, that whole process just came out. That's just another form of the revised Book of 100. Look that up. Ordained by George. It was basically a Christian Waqif established in the name of George for them to be able to do business like Moors as Christians. That's why the definition of Moor in the Black's Law Dictionary says that the Moors are the bailiffs of the hundreds. 100 mean corporation. That's why they do a Fortune 500. Because these are all the corporations that descended from the original corporation, which was the Dutch East India Company. That they all still got equity and shares in. That still exists today under many different names. But niggas is talking about the Rothschilds and this one and that one. You understand? for the past time you've been alive that this has been the systems that your own people been flipping on you? How many times you've been in a situation when you've had to fight to establish yourself? Guess what that is? Darwinism. How many times you was in church and feeling compelled, or temple or mosque or whatever, to do something and you didn't feel right about it but had to do it because the family did? That's oligarchism. How many times you've been in a situation where somebody's talking to you about politics and you have a separate opinion, and then everybody jump on you and tell you that you crazy, you just don't want to vote, want to be a part of nothing? That's democratic socialism. How many times you've been in a situation where you wanted to do something nice for yourself or pay your rent, whatever, and ain't had no money? That's communism. That's capitalism. How many times you've been in a situation you've been pressured about getting money to do situations, whatever? Guess what? That's communism. See what I'm saying? And when you put all of that together, and a white face or a black face or Asian face or African face or a Malaysian face or Arab face, it's all white supremacy. You just think it's different because they tell you it's different. It ain't. And they ain't going to stop doing that. They're not going to stop doing this. This is not going to stop. And that's why black folk is doomed to fall into whatever system they fall into, because, again, they don't realize that they're relying on the kindness of strangers. And these are the people that turn them into animals. We ran the whole world basically up until the 1800s, late 1800s, and all of that, into the 1900s, which was the heyday for them. That's why they call it the Roaring 20s. The Roaring 20s. That's where they could just get it in. They was burning up everything, taking over everything, locking up everybody. Think about it. How is it you go from this? You going from the slavery, as they say, then to Jim Crow, then from Jim Crow to segregation, then from segregation to the prison pipeline. It's like, yo, but all of that comes with the 14th Amendment, of which you're assumed to be that. But like the prophet said, we didn't need that to come into the union because we was already in it. The African Barbary being bounded in this way in the north and the west, and our American Barbary from the south and the east. This is Thomas Jefferson. But there are no two spaces of the surface of the globe that the two extent of the examination of the map will verify about that what state, there it is again, which the present so made distinctive features of resemblance, meaning the people who was originally there. Whether we consider the parallels of latitude in which they lie, or the nature of their boundaries or productions, and their peculiar domestic institution which sought to shelter in both, I introduce these comparisons in order to bring home to your minds, as near as possible, the precise position and character of the territory which was the seat of evil I'm about to describe. It might be worthy to inquire why any Christian slavery, banished at last from Europe, because only Christians enslaved was in Europe, was the white people, banished from also from that part of the hemisphere which corresponds to the latitude of Europe, should have entrenched itself in both hemispheres, between the same parallels of latitude, so that Virginia, Carolina, and Mississippi and Texas should be the American complement to Morocco, Algiers, Tripoli, and Tunis. But they tell you that this ain't Morocco. Well, let's add on to that to verify that, because this point just deads everything. Where again it says, adds on to what he's saying. He's saying all of these areas he spoke about is right here. That's everything west of this. Coming from Morocco, which would be all the way over here, coming all the way down to this, represents Barbary. And what does it say? It says, thence beyond the Bravo begin the more, and the natural boundaries between the Anglo-Saxon and the Mauritanian races. Didn't he just spoke about the boundaries? Showing that there was a Moorish presence, ancient Moorish, meaning Mauritanian, and the Moorish peoples and their Indian descendants. But the people just want to claim the latter, who had the least control over the land, due to them being exiles from Siberia who came over again here in the 13th century. Same made up. This is the history that they've been denying us for the past, I would say, 1,000 years, really. We don't even know that we have different, that we just think like you either get had, mad, sad, happy, glad, frustrated. These are emotions, but there's way more emotions than that. We have 23 different emotions, and probably more, that correspond to different aspects of things we've experienced in our life, but we think it's something else. Remember, they say everything has a season. And in the cosmology that they follow, every season is ruled by an archangel. So the summer is Uriel, the autumn is Michael, Michael, the archangel is Raphael for the spring, and Gabriel is the angel for the winter. As you can see, all angels are Moors because they end with El. And Moors are always the ones bringing the message on behalf of Allah to the people. Which is why, out of all of the systems, I think it's wise that the Prophet chose nationalism as a means to extend that. But again, because the United States is acting as the occupying representative third party to America and the Republican form of government, its laws are what's functioning until that republic is restored. And that's the problem. We don't even be knowing what we be feeling. Like monachopsis is a subtle and persistent feeling of being out of place. Sonder is the realization that each passerby has a life as vivid and complex as your own. So to sonder is to do that. Opia is the ambiguous intensity of looking someone in the eye, which can feel simultaneously invasive and vulnerable. Imagine being able to qualify your feelings as you have them, as opposed to being subject to them. To do that, we have to understand the basis of what we are saying when we say, okay, well, I'm a Moor. Like, I don't like using the word Moorish American national per se, like my paperwork and stuff, because they've already, screwed that up. So a non-USA national is basically equivalent, but the term national, as being applied to the character and property of the national government, you are a member of the national government as a American, or i.e. Moorish American, let's say, citizen of the republic by which it stands, not the democracy that interprets on behalf of the republic, you see, of which it actually usurped, which then means it's illegal. You see what I'm saying? But instead of Moors going back to their own Sherifian form of government, they want to join into the structure, which then prohibits them from having any say outside of the general consensus. You see what I'm saying? The constant United States destabilization of South America, for instance, we were talking about Cuba and all that, is all based in the fact that it is the oldest territory, one of the oldest territories of our people, of the empire. And a lot of the stuff that they use in that basin and bring up, they're able to sell up here and then export everywhere else. So that's why they'll hit all of these guys with cancer. but nobody will do nothing because they have a perpetual seat on the UN Council. So you see what I'm saying? The whole thing is rigged from that. Right. The USA, America being the optimal name for the state or states that you reside in. You see what I'm saying? So like when that guy Kevin Howard, Terrence Howard was talking about the flower of life and all of that. That's him coming into the realization again of the wave pattern that exists within all aspects of this grid that they got us all in. So if you are an Indian, if you consider yourself that, then you fall into these circles. You know what I'm saying? If you each one of these would represent a different aspect of consciousness or ideology that individuals get trapped up in. But within that circle, there's all these different divisions that make the individual what it is. But that has to be segmented and broken in order for them to exist under a state. So what made societies and empires last was how long they could preserve the nature of the original state of man that existed together in what this version of the Eden, which would be the garden, which would be the city, which would be the town, which would be the realm or whatever that they existed in up until whatever point. So so they would see it as the fall of this empire. Let's say the Trasomores would look at the fall of the Drahamores as the will of Allah. Because if they were still on the level that they was on, then they wouldn't have fallen victim like that. And this is why a lot of times we would fall as a collective as well, because in a way that's true. But that was considered the ancient way of thinking. You understand? Again, meritocracy. See what I'm saying? Religion came in and clouded that. And that became the basis because now the ideology could be exacted through some sort of physical means, mostly extreme. You see what I'm saying? So from the flower of life, you get the seed of life, which then creates the egg, which again is the sunflower, the daisy, or whatever else. Because mammalian life projects outwardly what exists within it inwardly. So when we're seeing images of outer space, we're also seeing images of the inside of ourselves. You see what I'm saying? Or really, it might be that the inner space, to get to what we perceive as outer space, you have to go within the inner earth to do so, or within the self to do so. Which is what these original people that they started calling Indians that existed in the Antilles, Cuba, America, all of that was there. So right here it says, the derivative of the term Antilles is rather complex. The name Antilia or Antilles long antedates Columbus. Antilia was believed to have been the large island of the Atlantic, some 800 leagues west, about the size of Portugal, which, according to the Ryak Chronicles and the Portuguese myths, was a refuge home for King Roderick, the last king of the Visigoths of Spain, along with the 7 Christian bishops and their following who fled Portugal after the battle with the Moors in the 8th century, and whom peopled the 7 cities on the island. These 7 cities are what so-called Estebanico, Little Stephen. They sent the Spaniards in later to try to find those cities because they were all where the gold and all of that was about. Was that? These are what they call the 7 cities of Cibola. You see? Which allegedly were connected or built in connection to the 7 sisters in the Pleiades cluster. which they call the Pleiades. So again, we're just trying to show and prove that this just says that after this happened, King Broderick and them came over here. So if they was white people, this means this dude predated Columbus. How come they never talk about him? See what I'm saying? Because they wasn't Caucasian people the way we see them today. They were different types of Asiatic people who were now practicing and indoctrinating and bringing in the so-called Christians or Cretans to then be adopted and used in proxy wars against one another, who then, as Mameluke slaves, eventually decided to raise up and form pacts with one another and then started to recreate the history. That's what the Jesuits and all of them was about. Because remember, Colon was a Jew. There is no Columbus. It was only Cristobal Colon. And to this day, the Colon family is the only ones that could go speak to the Pope without no letter. Humboldt hypothesized the name Antilia was derived from Altin, the Arabic word for the dragon. See? And that would make sense because Piri Reis was the one that they got the map to find out how to even get over here, Admiral Piri Reis. This right here is called the Tolkien, which is the Mayan so-called calendar, but the periodic, also the periodic table of the Mayan people, but it's also the expression of the melanin molecule as it travels, which again representing the flower of life. It's all the same thing. All of this was more science taught to us in the form of religion as children. And then when we got older, we learned customary law and all of that, which then became an active practice that we refer to as Sherifian law, or over here also referred to as the Great Law of Gaianashqua, which really is the Great Law of Ma'at. See what I'm saying? It's all the same people because it's the same thing. It's the same people doing it, just calling it different things based upon the time period that they existed in and who or whatever they was battling with at the time. In our Moorish, so-called Celtic forest culture, it was called Yggdrasil, the world tree. They just keep giving us back our own culture with their face on it, but with our clothes and stuff. Yes, that's why that was such a great book. He was kind of exposing that at a time when it was like this is where the Freemason stuff and all of the occult orders and all that stuff come in to cloud what they really trying to do. All that stuff is to ease you into not dealing with your own culture. I just showed and proved to you, or in this document or whatever, that the Arawaks, the Amerindians, and all these people is the same people that's in Jamaica and all these people today. But they told you they wiped out all of these people or whatever, and then they brought these other people from Africa, and it's okay. Yeah, they may have done that later, but that's not how them people got there. When Colon got there, they already had a society and a culture set up. The Tainos and the Arawaks was already a part of the Monarchan Empire. You know how they do. So based on the right of subrogation, you also have the right to your hereditaments. Your hereditament is anything that can be passed by an individual to your heirs. There are two types of hereditaments, corporeal and incorporeal. A corporeal hereditament is the permanent, tangible object that can be seen and handed and confined to the land, materials, coal, blah, blah, blah. An easement is a classic example of the type of hereditament since it's the right of the individual to use another's property and can be inherited. That's the BC. That's the what you call it, the instruments that they got on you. In any situation, you have the right to clear your name. So if they're calling you this and you let that go unchallenged, then you're agreeing that that's what you are, or that's what you're saying. So regardless to what they want to accept, you are not obligated to be a barrister of the court. You have the right to be heard. Everybody does, which is why they set up the administrative courts to keep people away from their true right to a republican form of government, which some in the vulgar sense would translate as an Article 3 government, which is dope, you know. However, that works better when we are unified as a people and do this for ourselves. Because the state governments, like I said, are all incorporated aspects of the United States aspect, and that, albeit as it may, is really there to provide for the what do you call it, the international protection. Remember, when Jefferson purchased Louisiana, he only purchased the barracks, the military barracks, and all of that at the port. They forced the war of contrition against those Moors in those areas to be able to break Grenada and then create the whole situation for Jackson to come in as a maniac and then just kill and do everything else. But one thing about Jackson, he was against the foreign bank. So, you see, because remember, they killed Alexander Hamilton, a Moor, a Chevalier, set up Aaron Burr to do it, killed him because Alexander Hamilton was the one that was trying to still keep control of the national bank. Right. You start by claiming self and nationalizing yourself. Because to be an American, you either are by birth or by naturalization. See what I'm saying? To be naturalized, you have to be a part of the nation. Therefore, whatever body that you're with has to be functioning and activating in the capacity of a nation. And we just read what the national aspect is. But when that happens, most blacks fall into the white supremacist notion of one of those objectives that we listed, that all wind up supporting the white supremacist system in the first place, which really doesn't exist. It exists in the mind of those people who perpetuate it. You understand? But it's mostly perpetuated by people that aren't white. But this is their natural station. Not natural like they can't be nothing else. However, in everything that they put out, they always put out that they're, both God and the devil. But you can't be both. Whereas man, original man, has the ability to transcend both and exist in the higher self as or with Allah. That then manifests through him or her through the arm, leg, arm, head, by the actions and what you're able to produce. So as you can see, this was the lot on the left, right-hand side of Caucasian people. The brutality that you see happening to us and the misrepresentation that was happening to us in these documents that you find, in these manifests, in these stories, a lot of that was fabricated or put in the improper context. If I kidnap you, a royal, and then ship you to a plantation without your knowing down to, Barbados or whatever, and then force you to live in a subject status, regardless to how, whatever, you either going to break to that or you're going to fight to that to the death. And this became the basis by which property and land could be taken. And the employ of that to make that happen, this is where these other races started to come up. And so history plays out the opposite effect, but we always see us at the downswing. When they were the ones always battling to find a way to perpetually take control. And in that, usher in a world or a system by which their aspect of doing things was the norm, which is the exact opposite, because that only worked in dominions that they had control over, which was not many. They carved up the empire that was already there. You know what I'm saying? Like, they didn't make these places. They didn't make India. India was thriving for thousands upon thousands of years. Dark skinned people was ruling for thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years. But we can't even claim or remember. Yet it falls to us to remember in order to access. And that's where the disconnect comes, because we're involved in so many different aspects that we don't have a national identity collectively. So those of us that subscribe to this are this. You know what I'm saying? Or have to be this because they put you through hell from that. Somebody named KPZK Lex posted a diagram which was, I think, accurate. You can find in the book Mongol Invasion in the 13th century of Peru. And kind of illustrates what I'm saying. We had a massive influx of foreigners working to destabilize and take advantage of the war between the types of Moors that were striving to maintain against what we perceive to be as Western Christianity. You know what I mean? So you got an import coming this way as they was being expelled by the Moorish Red Duchess in Russia. And then you had the Khan in them as the destabilization and what would become the rise of China. And its breakaway from Taiwan, where you get the so-called Mongol invasion, which is why you had so many Asian people in San Francisco and all of that. But these were still Asiatics. You see what I'm saying? Like us mostly. And then it became a mixture and a transliteration, because now they were able to bring all of their crime syndicates and stuff over here for them to do business the way that they was doing it over there. And due to now 100 years of being redesignated as Negro black colored, we now could not control the mode of operation, the means of production, which came from running the actual government. Because now it was a new deal being run and a whole nother foreign corporation that now taking control by 1933. That's why the prophet had to come before that to give them the warning, and us, which would then set in motion where we are today. So you have the conflict coming between these type of Moors. You see what I'm saying? And then this type of Moor is now on land going against the so-called direct government. So eventually they all get redesignated as Negro black colored. The Haitian Revolution is snatched away. And all the South American governments then start to go into a situation where now the different Spaniard classes that are promoted by the United States come in, and the darker peoples are forced out, or the people who want to stay and keep their, roots, they're basically forced to the fringe. And that's when the second class society starts, and then colonialism, you see what I'm saying? By the late 1800s. All based on us falling over here and then being put under this fake spell. So if you think I'm bugging, this was, again, from back in the days. Somebody posted this. You see, I just showed you the 3 types of Moors or Asiatics. Here they go again. Asiatico-Mongolian, that's what they call them today, the ancient Tartarian. Deep yellow color. They have black, stiff, red, rather bald head. Heads almost square, shaped mouths, whatever. Flat forehead, small eyes. The American or Indian race, found only in America, is of the deep copper color, straight black hair, huge high cheekbones, black sullen large faces, robust bodies, bone. Then you have the African or Negro race, which have the jet black skin, low, narrow foreheads, black, woolly hair, thick lips, and long heels. Because these are the ones that they are targeting, see what I'm saying, to be able to mix these two in with. You understand? Based on the Portuguese, which again were, Moors, really, but who employed white privateers um, to do their bidding for them, and employed the Congolese. And by the time Alphonse found out what was really going on, he had already been Christianized the whole kingdom and all of that. So that made him an enemy to some of his other animist or Islamic neighbors in terms of countries, and eventually the French came and exploited the whole thing. So that's what's up. Anybody have any last questions before we close out? Anybody any questions before we close out? The first thing I would say would be get a book called Time Walker by Meredith Quinn. You can get another book called Secrets of the Mounds. Get the book on Cahokia Mound. Also, look into the spiritual practices of the Anasazi people. Get a book called Time in the Technosphere to get into their relationship between them and the Olmecs and the Moors. It's really the same. It's just that it's being employed by Caucasian people through Christianity. Remember I said George created the Book of the Hundreds, which was a way for Christians basically to practice Moorish type business practices and nobility and stuff, but still be Christians. But, practice, more science, whatever, in secret. And so he or they established this type of order that allowed people to do that. Blessings to you, man. I'm glad you're safe, bro. One thing that can happen is just hit me up at houseofl@hotmail.com. My computer is messed up, so it threw me off this month like heavy. So I'm sorry if anybody that ordered anything or I haven't been able to get back to. Been having to redraft a lot of stuff by hand and stuff. So what was I gonna say? So you can hit me up at houseofl@hotmail.com. And yeah, be safe, brother. Definitely that. This is also something that the ancestors used to do. They used to put bebes and stuff at the bottom of their shoes. Some of the Moors used to do like crescent and star, or magic squares or whatever. These were just some of the ancient practices they would do on their journeys and stuff. Just for some reason, let people know. This again is an image of us in our splendor. You know, be hating. As you can see, they're distinctly Moorish. It's not African or whatever. So, yeah, we showed and proved, I think, a lot tonight again. So, anybody have any questions, hit me up at houseofl@hotmail.com. You can also check out www.cordobaorganics.com. Also, www.aseerducateers.com. I'll definitely hit you back. I'm striving to work it out to get back. Everybody's join out if you ordered. Get it out sooner or later, inshallah. Yeah, they're about to come up to what is it, Samhain? See the Samhain, Beltane, Wild Purges. Wild Purges is the night before Beltane. Yeah, so they're about to do their thing. Because again, this is the last month of Jason. So that's why they've been doing all of the BS. That's why, again, as we close, I definitely want to give respect and light to all of the Moabitises, sisters that have been in situations where they haven't been supported by Moors, or been in a situation where they were supposed to be, or whatever, or had to pledge things and be involved in different ideologies that they didn't understand was actually a part of the system that I just explained to you earlier. So we definitely want to pray for them and pray for their families, as well as pray to the to Allah, or to whatever you see, whatever, to those angels I spoke of that exist in the four corners that act as that. Also, real quick, human beings are not angels in the context of angels. We're angels in the context of messengers. We're, in a sense, above them, above that. Because once the message is given, it's then about you being God and seeing it through. So, with these women, they represent an aspect of our society that is left unprotected because of integration, because of malignancy amongst us, because of apathy, because of sectarianism, separatism, because of all of these ideologies that we spoke earlier. So we definitely want to give respect to them and their families and their sacrifice. Inshallah, they will receive justice and they'll be avenged. And on the day of judgment, we'll be there with the flaming sword and seeing it go down. But until then, we have to, in a sense, get our nationality and our understanding of ourselves straight first before we can help each other. So then that way we can do things, like I said, group economics, trust to trust banking. There's a whole lot of stuff that can be done, man. It's just that we can't do it on the internet, and we can't do it from the perspective of allowing situations like this to happen. There is nothing within any of these communities and any of these religious societies, and if it is not helping, that has established anything that we can find an independent courier in which we can get some sort of enforcement or penalty for whoever was behind the conspiracy to murder these women and the 64,000 other Asiatic women that are currently missing or in the human trafficking network being funded by things like DHS and Child Protective Services and Planned Parenthood and all that type of stuff. So essentially, it's up to us. What we're going to do as Moors, as men, as women. And inshallah, we can get to a point where we can establish something where we can be private and raise our children in the manner and splendor that we're supposed to have. It's very possible. And there's a lot of people living like that. The problem is they trying to live like that and then live like everybody else too. And you can't tap dance and slow dance at the same time. You know what I'm saying? So, Islam, thank you guys. And if you have any questions, just hit me up at houseofl@hotmail.com. All right? Peace.